Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Thousands of people forced from their homes over the weekend as wildfires from coast to coast rage on. At least one of those blazes closed a major highway in British Columbia. Plus, the trial began today for 4 men charged with conspiracy to commit murder at the Coutts border blockade in February of last year. And polls show former U.S. President Donald Trump's approval rating has gone up, despite the fact he's now facing a second criminal indictment and 37 felony counts.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Wildfires in 5 Canadian provinces from coast to coast continue to burn. Emergency Preparedness Minister Bill Blair gave an update this afternoon on the wildfire situation, saying almost 32,000 people remain evacuated. About 5,000 firefighting personnel have been deployed, and hundreds more firefighters from Chile, Costa Rica, Spain, and Portugal are expected to arrive in the country in the coming days.
Across the country, there are currently 431 wildfires burning, 208 of which are determined to be out of control. And while we have seen significant improvement in some regions, Western Canada, Quebec, and parts of Northern Ontario are still seeing wildfire smoke impacting air quality. Currently, almost 32,000 people remain evacuated, and 4.7 million hectares of forest have been burned. This now qualifies, unfortunately, as Canada's worst wildfire season of the 21st century. We currently have nearly 5,000 firefighting personnel, including firefighters, incident management personnel, overhead specialists, and members of the Canadian Armed Forces deployed in Alberta, Nova Scotia, and Quebec. And earlier today, we approved a second extension request from the Government of Alberta to continue with the CAF deployment in that province. There are currently 1,098 international firefighting resources in Canada. This includes firefighters, support personnel, and other assets, and they are supporting the ongoing response right across Canada.
It's also record wildfire season for the province of Quebec, where thousands of people were forced from their homes. Premier Francois Legault says there should be less than 4,000 evacuees remaining by the end of the day, and that's down from a peak of more than 13,000 on Friday. And in Alberta's Yellowhead County, west of Edmonton, the blaze has so far stayed just outside of Edson, but officials in the region say evacuation orders in Yellowhead County, including Edson, will stand. And there are now more than 80 wildfires burning across British Columbia, including one that has forced the continued closure of a major highway on Vancouver Island. Essential supplies were brought to residents of Port Alberni, Tofino, and Ucluelet yesterday, who have been isolated by the fire. And firefighters in Nova Scotia are using helicopters and infrared scanners to detect areas where firefighters should be dispatched. The 235 square kilometer Barrington Lake fire is still out of control, but is no longer growing. The trial began today for 4 men accused of conspiring to kill police officers at the Coutts border blockade last year. However, the court heard arguments from Tess Layton, who is the lawyer representing several Canadian media outlets, as well as the New York Times. She told Justice David Lebrunce that issuing a publication ban on documents would not be effective, as some of the information in question is already accessible to the public. She also said there would be no way to prevent the publication of materials in any jurisdiction other than Canada, as this case is garnering international interest. The judge has reserved his decision whether to impose a publication ban. Chris Carbert and Chris Lysick of Lethbridge, Jerry Morin of Olds, and Anthony Oleaniuk of Claresholm, Alberta, face a number of charges. They were arrested in February of last year after a cache of weapons were found in a trailer near the blockade. A Law Society of Alberta virtual hearing continued today into allegations that Tyler Shandro breached a code of conduct while he was a cabinet minister. Shandro, a lawyer who was defeated in last month's provincial election, had 3 complaints against him from his time as health minister early in the COVID-19 pandemic. The hearing started in January but needed to add days to finish it. He's accused of showing up at the home of a Calgary doctor who criticized him of privatizing healthcare in March of 2020, along with other accusations. David Johnston, the special rapporteur chosen by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to look into allegations of foreign interference in Canada, announced Friday that he was resigning his position. The former Governor General faced weeks of scrutiny over what the opposition parties called a conflict of interest due to his ties to Trudeau's family and Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. Meantime, Tory leader Pierre Poilievre says he'll work with the opposition to help shape a potential public inquiry into foreign meddling in Canadian elections and who might also lead it. He says he'll work with his opposition colleagues to make sure the person who fills that role is independent and unbiased in doing a thorough and public investigation, adding the person leading the potential inquiry would need to have no ties to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the Trudeau Foundation, or foreign dictatorship, and have a track record on nonpartisanship and neutrality.
I think he needs to call it right away. He needs to get someone who's job ready, and we need to have terms of reference that have tight timelines to have the hearings occur as quickly as possible and get all the truth on the table before the next election happens. The last thing we need, as you said, the last thing we need is for the truth to continue to be hidden in the next election. So there's no accountability, but worse yet, there could once again be foreign interference in the next election. So we need this public inquiry to be called immediately, and we need it to be on tight time frames so that it gets its findings to the Canadian people so that we can prevent this kind of interference from ever happening again.
Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc says a public inquiry looking into foreign interference attempts remains an option. He says he wants opposition leaders to work together to come up with its terms of reference now that David Johnston is stepping down from his watchdog role.
We think there should be a public process going forward, as Mr. Johnston recommended. So my hope is very quickly we can come to some consensus around those next steps. I think Canadians would benefit from that work.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is committing another $500 million to help Ukraine's military fight back against Russia's invasion. He made the announcement with Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky during a visit to Kyiv. Trudeau also received several standing ovations as he addressed Ukraine's parliament.
We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. In the conversations around NATO, we've always been very, very clear that we absolutely think that Ukraine should join NATO when the conditions are right for it. This is something that we know is really important.
And speaking of the war between Ukraine and Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin is marking a public holiday by linking patriotic feelings to support for Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine. The Day of Russia comes amid intensifying counteroffensive operations by Ukraine against the Russian forces who occupy about 20% of the country. Over the weekend, Putin also announced he's agreed to deploy tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus this summer, and it's been stirring up whispers of World War III. Our foreign affairs correspondent Lisa Daftari weighs in.
What has taken so long in terms of Putin's strategy? Why hasn't this been a shorter fight? Why is he dragging other countries into it? That's where we're worried that this will escalate into something much bigger when it doesn't have to. And then who then will get involved to curb Russia at that point? Will anybody else get involved? Or will they sit back and allow Russia to go on this rampage? And that's really the message. What message is the global community sending to Putin and Russia right now by standing back and seeing what will happen on his time?
Catch the full interview with Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk coming up after business news. Back home here in Western Canada, wildfires and air quality aren't the only causes for concern. Temperatures in our region are expected to climb again Tuesday, and this could cause the heat grid to be strained as more residents will be likely using their air conditioning units and fans to keep cool. But how does this affect the average consumer? Trevor Lewington with Ridge Utilities explains.
Typically you get a spike in prices. So if you're on what's called the regulated rate, like if you're riding the market, that spike in demand combined with a lack of supply will cause power prices to spike within a day. And that does impact about a third of Albertans that are on a regulated rate option, which is the default power rate. 2/3 of Albertans are on a fixed rate plan. They'll see no difference whatsoever. But for that 1/3 on a floating rate, those price spikes influence the price that you pay at the end of the month. And so that's why, the average consumer is kind of concerned about making sure that that happens effectively.
Lewington says at times the Alberta electrical system operator will send out alerts to folks during the summertime asking for people to cut back on their use of air conditioning and fans so a blackout does not happen. Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy coach Jamie Ellicott was back in court on Monday morning. Ellicott was arrested last year and was charged with 4 counts of sexual assault and 4 counts of sexual interference. Staff from the Lethbridge Police Service told us the girls ranged in age from 7 to 14 years old. Each victim went to the now defunct gym where the alleged abuse took place. Back in April, Ellicott fired his lawyer and is now searching for a new one to represent him in court. The matter has been adjourned to July 10th at 10 a.m. Lethbridge police need the public's help finding a man suspected of stabbing another man early Saturday morning. Shortly after 1:30 a.m. on June 10th, the injured man had reportedly entered a business seeking help along the 400 block of Mayor McGrath Drive South. Police located the 38-year-old with stab injuries. He was transported to Chinook Regional Hospital for treatment of serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The second man has not been located. The subject is described as an Indigenous male, approximately 20 to 25 years old, with short hair, wearing a gray sweater, black shorts, and a black and white shoes. Anyone information is asked to call Lethbridge Police at the number on your screen there. And in other news, nearly $31,000 worth of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine have been taken off the streets, and a 43-year-old man has been charged with drug trafficking offenses. Lethbridge police seized the drugs after responding to reports of drug trafficking by a man connected to a certain vehicle. When he was approached by police, he fled and attempted to dispose of evidence, but he was apprehended and a search warrant was obtained on his vehicle. Larry Hurl Jr. was charged with possession and trafficking and was remanded into custody. Well, June is Pride Month, and the University of Lethbridge says that they're committed to making sure the campus is open and inclusive for all of its students. An official with the post-secondary institution says more work needs to be done, but they are happy with the progress that has been made to create that inclusive space for students.
Is our university accessible? Is it affordable? Do we have clear pathways that students can see themselves within that space? One thing people don't realize that going to university could seem very intimidating. So how do we make it seem that no matter what your background is, that there is a space and a place for you? There's a program that matters. So we're really looking at scholarships, bursaries to make sure that's affordable and students can get access, but also pathways and students that need all the supports, mental health supports, wellness supports. What does that look like so that they can feel that they can be successful?
The university will be hosting some Pride-related events this month. A full list and more details can be found on their website. Well, this past weekend, a large group of supporters gathered at Henderson Lake in Lethbridge for the first in-person kidney walk in 3 years. We were at the event and chatted with families who have been deeply impacted by kidney disease. They also touted the importance of organ donation, which can help save the lives of those living with the illness. BCN's Micah Quinn has the story.
Around 60 walkers put their best foot forward in the battle against kidney disease on Saturday morning. There is currently no cure for the illness, and according to the Kidney Foundation of Canada, 1 in 10 people are affected by it. Shelley Hamilton, a kidney walk donor and participant, was able to give the gift of life to her husband after donating one of her own kidneys to him.
It was emotional, really emotional, but also just amazing, the people that supported us and the fact that I was able to give him a kidney and, change our lives for the better and keep him around.
The funds raised for the event will help with patient supports and research, along with education and awareness. Jan Clemis, a longtime walker, told us she received a kidney transplant from her son 5 years ago.
It's very hard to put into words the gratitude that those of us that have been able to receive an organ donation. Very heartwarming to know that somebody gives the gift of life, because it certainly is.
An organ transplant isn't a cure, but 76% of Canadians Canadians waiting for one are also waiting for a kidney. Sue Huffman got involved with the kidney world in 2011 after her daughter was diagnosed with an autoimmune type of kidney disease.
A lot of times people don't even know they have kidney disease until they have an acute health issue, and then they discover that they, in fact, their kidneys are not functioning the way they should be.
Staff with the Kidney Foundation's Southern Alberta branch explained to us how much money was raised as of Saturday.
They raised almost $17,000, which we're so grateful for that. So big thank you, and hope to see everybody next year.
The waitlist for a donation from a deceased donor can take quite a while, with the median wait time coming in at 3.5 years. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. Well, the Calgary Flames have announced who their next head coach will be, and it looks like they've promoted from within the organization. Ryan Huska will take over after 5 years as the team's assistant. The 47-year-old from Trail, BC replaces Daryl Sutter, who was fired in May. Calgary has changed head coaches 5 times in 8 years. Well, for the first time in 69 years, a Canadian has won the Canadian Open. Nick Taylor of Abbotsford, BC, rallied to the title of the Men's National Golf Championship after shooting a 3 over 75 in Thursday's first round. Taylor rolled in a 72-foot eagle putt on the 4th playoff hole to beat Tommy Fleetwood on Sunday at the RBC Canadian Open.
Nick, you're the first Canadian since 1954 to win this country's National Open. What does it mean to you?
I heard someone shout out there everything, and I don't know any other word to use other than that. I think it's a tournament that we've circled on our calendar since probably junior golf, but ever since been on PGA Tour, this is one that we want to do as well as we can in, and the crowd support was the most unbelievable thing I've probably ever experienced in my life. To kind of break that curse, if you want to call it, is I'm pretty speechless. I don't think it's going to sink in for quite some time what happened today.
And south of the border, new polling data from ABC News and Ipsos shows former U.S. President Donald Trump's approval rating has gone up, despite the fact that he's now facing a second criminal indictment. Trump's approval rating has gone from 25% when he was first indicted to 31% now, but 61% of Americans polled say they believe the charges against Trump are serious. The U.S. Justice Department unsealed the indictment on Friday, charging Trump with 37 felony counts, most of them relating to the willful retention of national defense information. Looking across the pond now, the death of former Italian Premier Silvio Berlusconi has drawn tributes from around the world. Pope Francis sent a condolence telegram to Berlusconi's daughter, Marina, offering his prayers. Former U.S. President George W. Bush recalled the billionaire media mogul as a vibrant leader with a personality to match. Berlusconi died today in a Milan hospital where he was receiving treatment for chronic leukemia. Well, the mercury is about to soar again, at least for a day before heading back to seasonable temperatures. We'll have a peek at the forecast coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, the average temperature for this time of year is just under 22 degrees, but we're going to be seeing things get much warmer, particularly on Tuesday. Angela Stewart is standing by with a full look at our weather forecast. Angela, just how hot is it supposed to get on Tuesday, and could we be looking at breaking a record?
Yeah, Jeanette, you are so right there. It's going to be very, very hot tomorrow and also could be a record setter. 32 degrees there, as you can see, the expected high for tomorrow. But as we head into the rest of the week, we're going to be kind of seeing those low to mid-20s. Wednesday, Thursday, expected to be 21 degrees, lots of sunshine. So it is going to be very, very warm this week. 25 on Friday. And then heading into the weekend, that's when we're going to see that mix of sun and cloud with some slightly cooler temperatures, but it's still going to be hot, 23, 22 there for Saturday, Sunday. The average high for this time of year is 22 degrees, so we did beat that average. The average low, 8 degrees there, as you can see. The highest temperature recorded back on this day was in 1959. 33 degrees was the highest temperature. Lowest temperature was 1 degree back in 1999. Our sunrise this morning, was at 5:23 and expected to set at 9:39 tonight. Now, looking to temperatures across the country for Tuesday, we're going to be seeing some smoke across the country because of the wildfire situation here in central Alberta. But out on the coast in Victoria and in Vancouver, they're going to be seeing a little bit of moisture. Vancouver near the Juan de Fuca Strait, they're also going to be seeing some wind. That moisture, like I said, 20 degrees in Vancouver. Now, Edmonton, Calgary is where we're going to be seeing that local smoke because of the wildfire situation, but also a risk of thunderstorm in Edmonton and in Calgary, 28 degrees, the expected high for Tuesday there. Now, as we move to Saskatchewan, Saskatoon is the only place in Saskatchewan where they're going to be feeling the effects of the wildfire, but still very hot, 29 degrees there. 31 expected in Regina tomorrow, very hot like I mentioned. Winnipeg, same deal, very hot, humid temperatures. And to the central part of the country now, more moisture is kind of what we're feeling here. Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto, risk of a thunderstorm in Ottawa and in Toronto for tomorrow. 20, the expected high, 22 and 19. Now, out on the island, on the eastern part of the country, St. John's, lowest temperature across the country, 7 degrees, the expected high. In Fredericton, they're also going to be seeing some rain, potentially a risk of a thunderstorm, 27, 26 though in Halifax and in Charlottetown, where they're going to be seeing a lot more sunshine and those warmer temperatures. And that's a look at your full weather forecast.
One of America's biggest banks has settled with the victims of the late financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The lawsuit filed in Manhattan Federal Court in November sought to hold J.P. Morgan financially liable for Epstein's abuse of teenage girls and young women that spanned decades. J.P. Morgan continued to count Epstein as a client despite his guilty plea to sex crimes charges in 2008. In a statement today, the bank says it believes the settlement is in the interest of all parties, especially those who suffered what it calls, quote, unimaginable abuse at the hands of this man, end quote. Metals and mining giant Rio Tinto says it will spend $1.4 billion to expand an aluminum smelter in Quebec using greener technology. The expansion will take place on an existing site that's adjacent to the company's 97-year-old Arivda smelter in Seguini. Today's announcement eases anxiety over jobs ahead of Arivda's closure in 2025. It also gives more weight to Rio Tinto's claim of being a producer of green aluminum, with the newer facilities to emit far fewer greenhouse gas emissions. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 29 points on the day to finish at 19,921. The Dow was up 189 points to 34,066. The S&P 500 was up 40 points to 4338, and the Nasdaq was up 202 points to finish at 13,461. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 305 to 67.12 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 45 cents to 11.75 US. Gold was even at $1957.84 US an ounce, and silver was also even at $24.05 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.16 per bushel, barley is at $8.93, canola is at $15.56, and corn is at $10.31 per bushel. Live cattle were up 85 cents to $179.08. Feeder cattle were up 5 cents to $239.05. Lean hogs were down 70 cents to $87.18. And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 74.81 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Canada's emergency preparedness minister says 431 wildfires are burning across Canada and more than 200 are out of control. There are 68 active wildfires in northern Ontario, an increase of 6 from Sunday. Gusty winds have kicked up a huge wildfire in northeastern British Columbia, prompting evacuation orders for remote properties outside Fort Nelson. In Nova Scotia, officials say the massive Barrington Lake wildfire that has forced more than 6,000 people from their homes is no longer growing, but is still classified as out of control. Is World War III upon us? Up next, our foreign affairs correspondent Lisa Daftari provides some insight into Russia's announcement to deploy tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus this summer. Catch that interview right after the break. And also, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Lots of big international news happening over the weekend. The U.S. has revealed China's been operating a spy base in Cuba for years. Iran is helping Russia to build a drone factory, and whispers of World War III as Putin announces he's agreed to deploy tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus this summer. Boy, here to break it all down is our foreign affairs correspondent, Lisa Daftari, who is the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. She joins me now from Los Angeles. Lisa, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you. Okay. So, Lisa, over the weekend, new information from the Biden administration reveals that China has been operating a spy base, I guess, in Cuba for the past 4 years. So they say it's part of a global effort to the Chinese Communist government to strengthen its intelligence gathering capabilities. So, Lisa, what else can you tell us about this? And how long has the U.S. known about it, too?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's not I should start with this. It's believable because we know what China is up to. They're actually here in the United States. I'm sure they're in Canada. They have their operatives in all facets of American life. And we know that they have interns that they send out to Congress. We know that they're operating in our universities, in our labs, and the list goes on. They even had their own de facto intel gathering police force in New York City. It wasn't really a police force. It was more like a mafia that was controlling dissidents and what they were up to and all their activities. So the fact that there is such a thing is not surprising, but it's surprising that the United States, calmly reports about this and says, well, now we know, but, they've been operating since 2019. And then the question is, where else are they operating, right? And what else are they up to? And what is their ultimate goal? The fact that we know that they're on the march, the fact that we know that this is their endeavor is the first step. I mean, how are we going to curb their growth of China? It's probably the number one threat in terms of our foreign policy right now, and being ignored in many ways. We're actually watching them continue. And then we ask, what's China's next step, not as to what we will do in our next step to combat this growing threat.
Mm-hmm. You say this base is about 4 years old. How long has the U.S. known about this?
Well, the report that just broke is only a few months old, I believe, as to how long the U.S. government has known about it. Well, that's for the U.S. government to be more transparent and tell us about that. But that's what we have for today.
Okay, all right. And then speaking of, some newly declassified documents from the U.S. Embassy provide proof of contact between American representatives and Iranian aides to the Ayatollah. So these documents show that these Iranian aides engaged with Washington before and after Khomeini came into power.
Yeah, so this is over 44 years old. And the reason why this is so important right now is because the United States has decided not only will it not support regime change, it says that we don't get involved and we don't support regime change. When you're watching for 8 months, the people of Iran tell us that they want regime change. We don't have to make such a case for them. The Ayatollahs make the case themselves with all the executions and poisoning of young school children, killing of peaceful protesters, and the way that they have handled not only human rights, but their nuclear program. I mean, they were in a deal and they were enriching uranium upwards of 80%. We know that they're working on a weapons program, and we know they've put billions of dollars into global terrorism, but yet now, not only does the United States not want to support regime change and support the people's movement, they've actually admitted this week that they have had sideline conversations with Iran's regime to get back into another nuclear deal. They have met in Oman. They have met on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. And of course, we know that is what they're aspiring to do. The Biden administration wants a deal with Iran's regime, and they do not want to support regime change. These latest documents reveal that the Carter administration not only supported the fall of the Shah, which was regime change, but they actually had a part in it, meaning that they met with Khomeini, that he's the architect of the Iran Revolution, and he came in the aftermath of the Shah of Iran. They met with officials that surrounded him, or his advisors, before and after he came into power, signaling the fact that Carter had much more of a role in toppling and dethroning the Shah of Iran.
And this is, of course, the talk about reviving that 2015 nuclear pact, right? And I guess just on Sunday, Khomeini was quoted as saying that there's nothing wrong with that nuclear deal in the West.
Right. So the current supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, said that, you know what, there's nothing wrong with it. But at the same time, it's interesting to see how much Iran's regime believes they have the upper hand, displaying a lot of bad behavior. I mean, capturing these oil tankers in the seas, continuing with the executions, but yet being rewarded both by the United States and the Biden administration in getting another deal and getting billions of dollars with that deal, and also the United Nations giving them honors and roles in these nations, voting Iran's regime into these these powerful positions and roles at the United Nations. So it's interesting to see that there are no consequences, and Iran's regime is well aware of that, taking advantage of the current global climate in which the Europeans won't punish them, the United States won't punish them, and if anything, they're only going to be rewarded with billions of dollars to continue with their bad behavior.
Wow. Okay. And then the U.S. is also saying that Iran is building a drone factory and reportedly shipping materials to Russia to help them with the construction of it. So, Lisa, this isn't the first time we've heard of Iranian-made weapons in Russia, right?
No, and that's exactly it. We know that we have seen, according to the Ukrainians, Iranian-made weapons sold, shipped to Russia to use in its invasion of Ukraine. So let me just paint this picture and connect the dots for you a bit more. The United States putting billions of dollars and giving military aid to Ukraine, of course, to defend itself against the Russian invasion. Then the Biden administration also would like to get into a deal and has already given the nod on unfreezing billions of dollars in assets to Iran's regime from Iraq, and further would like to give billions of dollars in connection to a new Iran deal to Iran's regime. What will Iran's regime then do? Use that money to not put it not just into regional terror and support Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and suicide bombers, but they will also put that money into selling weapons to Russia. So when you connect the dots and you fill in this circle, we are in effect, the United States meaning, fueling both sides of the invasion, of the Russian invasion into Ukraine, giving money and assets to Ukraine, and also giving Iran's regime the money and assets to then make weapons and sell them to Russia.
Wow.
Make it make sense.
No, exactly. Let's make that make sense, right? Okay, shifting gears here. Lisa, it's Pride Month, and the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights announced a No Pride in Apartheid campaign that targets Israel. So it's accusing Israel of presenting a false image as a queer safe haven and ignoring Gaza's anti-LGBTQ laws. So they're also accusing Israel of pink washing. So tell us more about this, Lisa.
It's asinine. This is the farther left taking advantage and really conflating two very separate issues. And those issues are, number one, the fact that it's a fact that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has a gay pride parade, has Pride Month, openly allows for homosexuality and many, many, many other human rights that Israelis and Arabs and Christians enjoy side by side inside the state of Israel. Women are in all parts of life. There were women prime ministers and women members of the Knesset, which is the parliament, and women in all sectors of technology and medicine and the forefronts of the country, and also, of course, gay rights and, again, abortion rights. The list goes on. They are at the moment having a kind of I don't want to say it's civil disruption, but it's an internal conflict regarding their judicial reform. Now, the left wants to take advantage of this and say, well, you're nothing if you're going to do these judicial reforms, because, of course, who's going to lose in the judicial reforms? It's going to be the status quo, the fact that the left has had monopoly over a lot of the judicial issues for so many years, et cetera. So what the left, both outside of the country, inside the country, those who are supporting it from even the United States, giving money for these protests inside Israel, are trying to do is conflate two very different things and saying, who cares about your pride, and your pride parade and all these wonderful rights that Israelis enjoy if you're going to have these judicial reforms, which makes absolutely no sense when, in fact, you juxtaposed it with all the lack of rights, both for the Palestinians, for so many other Arab nations that do not allow homosexuality. The women don't have rights. Women can't leave the home. Women aren't going to school, brainwashing the children, and the list goes on. So we want to make sure that we're reporting the facts and not conflating two very, very different issues.
Okay, Lisa, some sad news. At least 22 children are among the dozens of people killed and wounded from an explosive device that was detonated during a recreational soccer game in Somalia on Friday. And later that same day, it looks like 9 people were killed and 10 others injured in a terrorist attack at a luxury resort also in Somalia. So, Lisa, who's responsible for these heinous actions?
Right. So these are insurgencies that are growing inside Africa. And, the West doesn't pay as much attention as it should. Of course, we're watching the civil war in Sudan spill over because of terrorism and because of, greed and two warring factions. And, of course, spilling into other parts of Africa, we have these insurgencies that are growing. Inside Somalia, we've always had issues of these smaller insurgencies growing. These are basically splinter groups that peek their heads once in a while to have these one-off attacks and to gain street credit, to gain followers and recruits, to gain money and donations from other, terror sympathizers. And here we have it in Somalia, terrorism growing. And, again, we're not paying attention much to that part of the world, and we see these insurgencies grow. And these are where political vacuums then grow, and other bad actors like Russia, like China, are able to swoop in and gain control of these areas, giving them infrastructure, giving them schools, buying them internet, and then gaining more access, more hearts and minds, and of course, more power on the global map. So this is the issue with not paying attention to these parts of the world where these insurgencies are in fact growing.
Oh, definitely. Okay, Lisa, there are whispers of World War III as Putin announced that he agrees to deploy tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus in July. So Putin is reportedly saying the U.S. and its Western allies are pumping arms into Ukraine as a proxy war aimed at bringing Russia to its knees. So what can you tell us about this?
Right. So it's obviously targeted towards Ukraine and being able to do whatever it can to flex its muscles. We knew that we would get to this kind of fork in the road. And there have been many forks or maybe splinters along the road, but the main fork that we will come to is whether Putin will sit down for some sort of compromise or ceasefire, or if he's going to up the ante, and then we will see a significant climax in the war to take him to victory. As everyone has said, I'm not the first one to say it, it's surprising how long this war has taken, because we would think that if Russia would invade Ukraine, if someone told you this 5 years ago, you would think it would take them about 24 hours to get the job done. But of course, we see a lot of obstacles along the way. Terrain issues, military, the size of their military not being able to handle it, having many casualties, etc. And of course, the West supporting Ukraine has bought them some time. So in fact, this has dragged on for over a year, and this is where we're at now. So Belarus had basically promised that they would be involved, and they would be on obviously Russia's side, providing them some sort, another foothold in the region. And now Russia has announced that it will, in fact, and has in fact been shipping arms to Belarus, and in July will start deploying from there as well. So dragging Belarus into this war, again, escalating the war, and yet giving it another facet. So we shall see what this will do in terms of the entirety of the war.
Yeah, crazy. How likely are these whispers to become shouts of World War III, Lisa? What do you think?
I mean, who knows? And so far this hasn't. People are pretty much ignoring the war in Ukraine. Unfortunately, I mean, what can be done other than giving all this money? People are putting up all sorts of things on social media where we stand with the Ukraine. We're thinking about the people of Ukraine, of course, but I mean, what really can be done? A lot of political leaks have indicated that there is no chance, obviously, and it doesn't take a leak or a genius to tell you that the Ukrainians don't really stand a chance. But what has taken so long in terms of Putin's strategy? Why hasn't this been a shorter fight? Why is he dragging other countries into it? That's where we're worried that this will escalate into something much bigger when it doesn't have to. And then who then will get involved to curb Russia at that point? Will anybody else get involved? Or will they sit back and allow Russia to go on this rampage? And that's really the message. What message is the global community sending to Putin and Russia right now by standing back and seeing what will happen on his time?
Interesting. Time will tell. Exactly there.
Yes.
All right, Lisa, looks like we're out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Jeanette.
That was Lisa Daftar, the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, joining me from Los Angeles.
Abortion continues to be a contentious issue around the world and here in Canada. Joining us today to discuss some of these issues is Dwayne Konynenbelt. He is a board member of Lethbridge Pro-Life, as well as Elsie's House. Dwayne, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today.
Excellent. So let's touch base on some of the abortion issues. Why is it that the majority of Canadian society seems supportive of abortion?
Well, I think sometimes it's based on the way that we frame the questions that we ask the people when we do these surveys. We certainly find that there are many pro-life issues where most Canadians agree. If you take issues like late-term abortion or sex-selective abortion, you'll find that most Canadians agree that those things are wrong. I also believe that when we get the pro-life message out and we try to tell people that we believe that people have value from conception until natural death, that basic idea that all people have value because they're created in the image of God is a great way to run a society. It gives everybody equal rights in all situations, and it's a great way to move forward. And so I think sometimes when it's framed that way, then it's very quickly people tend to agree with pro-life positions.
Right, so you're talking about the way things are framed. So when people are asked, do you support women's rights or do you support the right to choose, most people will say yes. But what exactly is the choice that we're talking about here?
Well, that's exactly right. Obviously, we support women and we support people to have choice, but there are some choices that we believe we can't make when they affect other people. And so in the pro-life cause, we think it's very important for people to understand that the unborn is human. So when we're talking about choice in this case, that there's more than one person. And so when someone says, my body, my choice, I think they're missing that there's another body involved here, there's another person. And when we recognize that there's another person, then suddenly the whole argument changes. So of course, we support choice. Of course, pro-life people are very supportive of women's rights. And we think women deserve better than abortion. We think abortion is hurtful to them. And we'd like to live in a world where they have every opportunity to be wonderful mothers and parents.
So you're talking about women's rights. Part of a good pro-life campaign would probably be to communicate to the public that you're not anti-women. So how is the pro-life movement actually supportive of women?
Sure. Well, the pro-life movement often has been accused of being anti-woman, but when you look at the movement itself, you'll find again that the people involved with it who feel that everyone has value are very supportive of women and all the things that they do. Here in Lethbridge, part of the way we do that, of course, is through the programs and support that we offer to the people here in Southern Alberta. We do run a place called Elsie's House, where women who find themselves in crisis pregnancies can go for support. And in all that we do, we try to do it in love, showing that we believe that there's a better way forward than abortion.
Now, a big part of the debate is at what point human life begins. Like, when is the fetus considered a human being with the same rights as a baby on the other side of the womb? Is it a heartbeat, or is it a certain part of the pregnancy term?
Right. And I do know that there's a lot of people in our society that try to frame that as a main kind of a talking point today. But I think if you look at our embryology textbooks, it's pretty clear that at the moment of conception, something happens where now it's no longer this foreign entity, but it's a human being on its track to being, it's fully human at that point with great potential. And so that's what we believe. We don't think this is an argument at all. I think the average person, if they understand anything about science, know that life begins at conception and it ends at death. And so these are sometimes people who are trying to distract from the real issue. But, the moment I was created, that was me. And when I was in my mother's womb, that was me. And when I was a kid, that was me. And now it's me. And if you were to go back in time and try and find a moment when I became me, it would be the point of conception. And so we like to stand by that. We think it's scientific, philosophical, it makes sense. And people who are trying to say that, there's some magical point, when someone becomes human, when they either go through the process of birth or when suddenly their heart starts beating, we don't buy those arguments. We think it's a very sound scientific argument that life begins at conception.
Now, I understand that a majority of Canadians do support limitations on late-term abortions, but politicians seem to shut down any attempts to legislate this. It isn't a conversation many people want to have, so why is it important to keep this topic as part of the public discussion, and how can we encourage people to discuss this rationally?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. We certainly have a lot of politicians today that don't want to talk about it. And if there are politicians who do, oftentimes media or people from other political parties target them and somehow try to label them as extremists for wanting to talk about this issue that affects all of us. But we do think it's important to continue to talk about it, to continue to make sure that people have the freedom to speak and to tell others that they think that people do have value. And so it's critical that we continue to guard our freedom of speech and talk on these issues, because it would be for the betterment of Canadian society if we put pro-life laws into place that protected the unborn and really then protected women.
Now let's talk to us about Elsie's House, which provides a safe place for new moms or moms-to-be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes people say that, people who are pro-life never do anything to support women or the children. And that's clearly not the case. If you look around the community programs here in Canada, many pro-life groups are involved in many different ways. Elsie's House is a program that we started about maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. It's named after a wonderful lady who used to work for Lethbridge and District Pro-Life and volunteered for many years. It's a place where if there are women who find themselves in crisis pregnancy and they don't have any place to turn, they can come to us in Elsie's House. And we not only provide them or work alongside them for room and board, but we provide them the programs to help them mentally, physically, spiritually move forward, to prepare to become mothers, prepare to become someone who's going to raise a child and to live independently and to find success. And so they come to us, they go through a number of programs, they live with us all the way through the birth, they stay with us for a few months, and then they transition into their own apartment and into independent living. And we try and come alongside them through the whole process. We do it because we are a Christian organization who loves the Lord Jesus Christ, but we allow everyone to come through the program. And we've had ladies from many different faith backgrounds or no faith at all come through and benefit from the program. And in all those cases, it's been a blessing to everyone involved.
Now, you said that the women are staying at Elsie's House for a few months. How many moms are able to be cared for at Elsie's House?
Sure. So right now we just have one location in Lethbridge, and in the home we can have up to 3 ladies. We have had that before. Normally there's 2 that are in there. That's kind of the ideal situation for the space that we have. We like them to come as early as they can when they know that they find themselves in this crisis pregnancy. It gives us the most opportunity to prepare them for motherhood. And then most times, depending again on the situation, within a few months, they're moving out after their child is born. But again, that's a general rule. There are some ladies that have had more needs that stay longer. There are some have had less needs that stay for a shorter period of time. It just depends on the client. There is clearly a demand for housing and help in this area in Lethbridge. We're currently looking for another location to grow it. But in all of these things, of course, there's cost and time, and we really want to move forward right so that we make sure we're providing a situation where they're loved. There are a lot of unique needs of ladies who find themselves in these situations. And we're very thrilled that we've been able to partner with many local and government organizations. This seems to be a home that crosses the pro-life, pro-choice line. These are women who want to keep their children, and we're all on board helping them. So that's wonderful to see that we're all working together. The government agencies are very supportive with their programming and clients and programs that we're allowed access to. And so we're very thrilled that we can work together with a lot of people on this.
And is there a cost to stay at the home?
So when the ladies come to us, there's an application process that we go through to see if they're eligible. It's not a criteria where we say if you can't afford, you can't come in. We try to use the criteria to say, would our programs benefit you? And if it will, we'll find a way to get you in here and to get you into the program. Now, there are some people that do have financial supports from the government and elsewhere. And so then certainly we would use those funds to help, welcome the ladies in and go towards their room and board. But it is not a criteria. So some pay some pay none. It absolutely depends on the case. But we're supported by our very generous donors. And so there is opportunity when they can't afford for us to give them the financial support that they need.
And so does Elsie's House need any volunteers, or do they need baby item donations?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting through the COVID years. It was very difficult to get volunteers in and to have people in the community help out. But obviously there is a need for volunteers and for helpers. We have a number of wonderful volunteers already that might drive ladies to doctor's appointments, or some of them still have jobs, some of them might be still in school. So help out with all of those things when the baby is born. Some help, care for the child or go through the programs with the mothers. If there was someone who's interested, they could go to our website, elsieshouse.com. And on that website, there is a form for volunteers to fill in. And then at any point in time, people who think it's a good program can donate. They can do that online. And that's kind of how things go. But we've been very blessed that when we present this need to the people of Southern Alberta, people from, like I say, pro-life, pro-choice, love what we're doing and are very generous to the program. And we're so thankful for that.
That's amazing to hear. Now, how can a woman get involved and stay at Elsie's House? Is there a waiting list, and is there a need for more places like this?
Yeah, so just like there's an application online for a volunteer, there's also an application online for someone who may think that they right now need a place to stay and are interested in hearing about it. But of course, there's also a phone number, and you can talk to our executive director right away. And I wouldn't say that there's a waiting list as such. We try to assess the needs, and if there is a need, help in some way. But yeah, currently when there's 3 ladies in the home, then unfortunately we don't have more spots right now. And I guess then that would be a waiting list. But we are kind of, when there's a big push, and we're very close to that, we do have the staff in place where we could rent another home and move forward in expanding the program.
Now, turning our attention back to Lethbridge Pro-Life, can you just tell us how the funds are raised and how they're spent? Because I know there's been some controversy in the past about some of the pro-life advertisements in Lethbridge.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, we had a bit of a disagreement with the city of Lethbridge over whether or not they would place our ads on the buses and bus benches. So we went to court, and thankfully we won all 5 cases, 5 counts against the city of Lethbridge. And so the judge was very clear that government elected officials, their job is to protect our freedom of speech. And so they have a responsibility not to count on outside agencies to try to, say which ads they can and cannot put up. As elected officials, they need to defend our freedom of speech. And since then, there's never been any issues, and it's been wonderful. And we've always tried to do our ads, of course, in love and compassion for all of those. But we certainly believe we have freedom to speak our minds on this position. And even if people disagree with our position, it doesn't mean we don't have the right to express it. So that's been a real blessing to us. Of the funds that we raise, we do have some staff that work on the support of all of our groups around City of Lethbridge. We do some advertising, do give some scholarships and some activities for young people. But the majority of our expense right now, of course, is Elsie's House. It takes quite a chunk of funds to run that program, to employ the staff, and especially as we want to move forward. And so that's kind of how we use the money.
This topic is often discussed about from a women's perspective, but let's talk about men's rights for a moment here, because men are parents too. What resources would a male have if his female partner wants an abortion, but he wants to keep the child? What resources would he have?
Well, that's a very difficult situation to be in right now, because obviously we give a lot of autonomy to the woman in this situation. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's the situation we find ourselves in. But you've really brought up a good point that this is not just a women's issue. This is something that affects all of us. It affects fathers and mothers. And so oftentimes when we talk about Elsie's House, we'll say young ladies and families who find themselves in crisis situations, because we realize there's a lot more people involved than just the lady here. And again, we believe that when you do believe that people have value from conception until natural death, and we all have equal rights, that recognizes that there's a lot of other people who are affected by this issue. And so there are many resources that you can find if you go to lifelethbridge.org. There are some resources for people who find themselves in that situation. Or again, you can call us and we can come alongside you and try and help through those situations, because they can be very, very difficult.
Dwayne Kinainen-Belt is a board member of Lethbridge Pro-Life and Elsie's House. Thanks so much for being with us today, Dwayne.
My pleasure.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.